Today is the very first Digital Citizen Day. It is the brainchild of Media Smarts. That's a Canadian nonprofit focused on digital and media literacy. And it's an opportunity to talk about something that we perhaps don't stop and think about enough: how to be good digital citizens. So, from the nation's capital, we're joined by Cara Brisson-Boivin. She is Director of Research for Media Smarts, and she's here with some tips on how to improve the online public square. Cara, it's good to meet you. How are you managing these days?
Oh, it's good to meet you. Thanks so much for having me.
Not at all. A pleasure. Why don't we just start with this? Is this a big deal, Digital Citizen Day?
It is. As you said, it's our first annual. And for us, it's a moment to pause and reflect and allow all of us to think about what it means to, live and engage and interact online. So much of our lives has shifted online, especially in the last couple of years. And sometimes we can forget that, our online interactions, have offline and online, consequences. And we want to take this moment to remind people that when we are online, we are in relationship with each other. The heart or core of digital media is that they are connected. We are all connected in an infinite, web of nodes and connections online. And I think sometimes we forget that relational element. We forget that there is a person on the other end of a comment or a post or a piece of content that we're sharing.
Well, you say we forget there's a person on the other end of the content that we're sharing or being insulting about or being toxic about or whatever. Is it a question of forgetting, or is it a question of we really don't care? We just want to say what we want to say and we don't give a damn who we hurt?
I think the online environment can facilitate some of that toxicity that you mentioned, for sure. And that's also something that we have a responsibility to be aware of, but also, a responsibility of platforms, regulators and so on. I think, things, especially when it comes to toxic or online hate and prejudice, it's incredibly important that we push back against those things. Our research has shown that it's typically the loudest 10% minority, in fact, that's pushing the sort of value setting or norm setting within online communities. So it's really important for us as users to signal to other users that these are not, in fact, the accepted norms or values of the online spaces that we are engaging in. And another way that we can, that can be remedied is through platforms making reporting of online hate and prejudice more accessible, easier to use, and also demonstrating enforcement when the codes of behavior in online spaces are broken. Because again, that would signal to users in the space that this kind of behavior is unacceptable. And when those codes of conduct are broken, that enforcement on the part of the platform is in fact, going to happen. That's one thing that our research has shown, is that users want to know when they report this kind of behavior that platforms are doing something about it.
Okay, let's tackle this from another angle, and that is personal information. What kind of personal information do you think we ought to be careful about sharing online?
Well, I think for sure we want to be mindful of things like our full birth date, our hometown, your address, both email address and your physical address, your phone number. And there are lots of ways that various, again, aspects of our online engagement can sort of trick us into handing over that information, sometimes unknowingly or not in ways that we originally anticipated. So one thing I would suggest is when you're signing up for an app or a platform, look for the kinds of information that's typically marked by an asterisk. That is information that is essential to be able to sign up for the platform. But otherwise, you're giving over that information sort of your own free will, and it's not necessarily required to utilize a platform. So, think about those things. You can also be aware of when you're engaging on online surveys, or sometimes, we see those quizzes or we get an e-card and they're asking for information as well. That information is often used by data brokers and, and advertisers in ways that we sometimes may not have originally intended our information to be used.
I hear you, but oftentimes isn't it the case that we give that extra information because if it's a shopping website, they're going to send us stuff that we're interested in. If it's an entertainment website, they're going to send us information about other concerts or movies or whatever that's sort of in our wheelhouse. So that's all presumably to the good, at what point does it become problematic and the sharing of data becomes harmful?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And our research, we've worked with young Canadians, youth in particular, but I think the sentiment is felt across generations. And that often privacy feels like the price we have to pay to play in these online spaces. And I think, when it comes to things like entertainment and leisure content, like you mentioned, our research has shown that for the most part, users are perfectly fine with getting advertisements that are, geared to their interests and their likes. But we've also done research that's looked at things like algorithms and artificial intelligence and how they're using data to recommend content to us. And users were flagging deep concerns with the way in which algorithms are making assumptions about groups of people based on things like race, sex, class, and determining what kinds of content to show those users. Also the way that algorithms and bias and prejudice are creeping up in things like, resume sifting, whether or not someone qualifies for a mortgage. Those were things that, are deeply problematic and deeply concerning. So I think there certainly is a kind of spectrum here, but again, I think the lack of autonomy and control that users feel around their privacy is troubling.
Kara, well, obviously you know this. Media literacy is certainly not what we need it to be. And I wonder if you could share some ways that you know of in which disreputable folks can trick people who are not as media literate as they should be into doing things online that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, and I mean, even folks like myself who do sort of digital media literacy for a living can be sometimes duped into, sharing misinformation. I think it's really important to keep in mind that today it's easy to copy and share content online. And so it's incredibly important that we go to the original source of a piece of information, especially if you're getting your news content primarily through social media. It's not enough to read a thumbnail or a headline over an image and reshare that. You have to do the work of going into the original source. It's also important to verify sources. Websites that are fake, look fake can be real, and websites that look real can be fake. And so doing things like a Wikipedia search to figure out if that organization is reputable. You can do a Google News search to see if multiple news outlets, including news outlets with different political bents, are reporting on a similar story. And I think it's also important these days to keep in mind the way in which our emotions come into play when we're sharing information. At the beginning of the pandemic, when things were really uncertain, and I was feeling a lot of fear, I was almost manipulated into sharing this, what I thought was a really good news piece about marine life returning to the Venice canals. And then after doing some reverse image searching and going to some original sources, I realized that those images were real, but they weren't of the Venice canal. They were being used in a different context. So my desire to share that good news story in a time when I was feeling a lot of fear and uncertainty impacted, or in some way sort of clouded my judgment. So we also need to take our emotions into consideration as well when we're sifting through the online information ecosystem.
Well, you're going to forgive this question, but if an expert like you can be tricked, what hope is there for the rest of us?
Well, I think there's actually quite a lot of hope, and we have this 4 sort of step process for what we call breaking the fake. And often you only need to do one of the steps, and it takes very little time. And we can keep in mind that there are fact-checking sources like Snopes. There are experts who do this for a living. It's not hard to check a source through a fact-checking site. And again, searching for the original source, verifying the source, checking other sources. Usually just one of those steps will help you determine if something is true or not.
Well, but the thing is, Kara, that requires effort. And most people, I guess, don't want to take the effort. In fact, it's more fun to just forward it or pass it along to Aunt Martha without any regard whatsoever to the veracity of what you're passing along. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, and I think we're kind of back to this idea of digital citizenship and ethical digital citizenship and what are our responsibilities. And I think, again, we have to keep in mind that in this digital world, we are all connected, more so than in the traditional media sense. I am no longer primarily the recipient of a newspaper that gets dropped off at, my, front door. Now I have the opportunity to read something and potentially circulate it to millions of people. And that comes with responsibility. It's great opportunity and great responsibility. And so I do think, it is, important that we all, consider the responsibility of our actions when sharing content online, and especially when they have repercussions for things like our public health and for people's political decision making. We shouldn't take these things lightly. So yes, I would encourage all of us, especially on Digital Citizen Day, to really think about the things that we can do, ourselves, alongside, the actions we need to see by platforms and governments.
I know you think it's important, but it's also, I suspect, fair to say that, and here's where I sort of push back a little bit, there's no obligation. There's no legal obligation to be responsible when you're online. In fact, I've obviously interviewed lots of people who say you may be more responsible being more disruptive online. You may be being responsible, pushing back and chafing at authority. And, my view would be if you do it in a civil way, that's fine, but it's the incivility that I find problematic. How do you get the message across to people that actually the internet's main use is not to blow things up or be a complete jackass online, but actually to be a responsible citizen?
Yeah, I think it's really important that folks keep in mind that not everyone experiences the internet in the same way. There are folks, racialized people, sexually and gender diverse folks, people who identify as female, who actively disengage from online spaces and avoid the internet because it is an unsafe place for them. And so I think, we have a lot of work to do in terms of making sure that the internet is a place for everyone, that they can engage, that they can amplify, that they can feel safe enough to sort of push back, as you're saying, against authority, to share their views in respectful ways. But we're a long way from having an internet where everybody feels like they can share their views and opinions safely. And I think we need to keep that in mind. And I'm not just talking about some of the lesser known platforms. I'm talking about all of the kinds of platforms that most of us are regularly engaging in on a daily basis. And these are spaces that a lot of folks don't feel safe on. And we do have a responsibility, as I said, we as other users have a responsibility to signal to our fellow platform users that this kind of behavior is unacceptable, and to bring it to the attention of the platforms as well, and to use our collective power as users to hold platforms and governments accountable.
Well, I'm with you on that one. Happy Digital Citizen Day to you and Kara Brisson-Boivin. We're grateful you could spare some time for us on TVO tonight. Many thanks.
My pleasure. Thanks again.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.